The big story in the UK today is that the Bank of England has announced an emergency cut in interest rates from 0.75% to 0.25% to shore up the economy amid the coronavirus outbreak. Now, this is the lowest level in history, and it comes as the Chancellor is expected to announce further measures to support growth and jobs in the budget later. Juliana Olayinka is waiting to give more details about these stories. Good morning, Juliana. Tell us what's the reaction you've seen since the BOE announced the emergency cuts in interest rates.
Good morning, Bissy. Well, I woke up to the breaking news, and so did everybody, that yes, the Bank of England have done an emergency interest rate cut by 0.5 percentage point.
Well, we'll be getting back to Juliana in just a moment, talking about the Bank of England slashing interest rates this morning. Of course, that's the breaking story coming from the UK. But let's give you a recap of some of the headlines that we brought to you this morning, talking about fresh data from the National Bureau of Statistics showing that Nigeria's total value of capital importation into the country stood at $3.8 million in the fourth quarter of 2019, and this represents a decline of 32.42% compared to the third quarter of 2019 and a 77.67% increase when compared to the fourth quarter of 2018. The total value of capital importation in 2019 stood at $23.99 million. That's against $16.81 million in 2018. The largest amount of capital importation by type was received through foreign portfolio investment, followed by other investment and foreign direct investments. The United Kingdom emerged as the country of origin with the highest amount of capital imported, while Lagos is the destination with the highest amount of capital importation. And the House of Representatives has scheduled consideration of the $22.79 billion external borrowing request by President Muhammadu Buhari today. And this comes barely a week after the Senate approved the loan request by President Muhammadu Buhari. Of course, some of the lawmakers were against the procedure for securing the loan, and they say that it's against the provisions of some laws, including the Fiscal Responsibility Act and the Debt Management Office Establishment Act. The group also frowned at the approved 2020 to 2022 medium-term expenditure framework, the fiscal strategy paper, and the principles of federal character and federalism. Juliana Olayinka is back with us from our London studio, and earlier on she was talking about the fact that the big story, of course, coming from there is that the Bank of England has announced an emergency cut in interest rate from 0.75% to 0.25%, and that is to shore up the economy amid the coronavirus outbreak. Juliana, earlier on, before we lost you, you were telling us about the reactions you've heard since this story broke this morning.
Yes, Bissy and the viewers, sorry if I'm going to be repeating myself, but like I said, the outgoing governor, Mark Carney, he's just delivered an emergency news conference with his successor, Andrew Bailey, who's due to take over from him in just a couple of days' time. And really what they're saying is that Threadneedle Street are trying to take a little bit of pressure off Downing Street by cutting this base rates. They've also announced some fiscal spending and some bonus packages that they will be delivering to small to medium-sized businesses, because they are the engine and the backbone of the British economy. And if what we're seeing and what we've been seeing on mainland continental Europe is likely to come into England in terms of shutting down sports matches, shutting down schools, shutting down businesses, restaurants, then these businesses will need all the stimulus and the economic tax breaks that they can get.
So it's the D-Day for the budget presentation in spite of all this, and the new Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, will deliver his first budget. What are the headlines in the papers regarding what is expected of the budget, especially with this latest announcement by the Bank of England?
Well, it's certainly a historic budget, and Rishi Sunak, he's kind of a new minister, hasn't been an MP for very long. He is under an immense amount of pressure. Not only are we dealing with COVID-19, not only did Boris Johnson promise the Labour wall, that red wall, that generations of people that have voted Labour, some infrastructure. Apparently, there's supposed to be infrastructure given to the north of England. Of up to £500 million. That's the promise that Boris Johnson gave these voters. Plus, as well, we're dealing with the fallout from Brexit. So there are so many issues that need to be dealt with, and the government will be held to account. But the buzzword, of course, is COVID-19. And we know that there is going to be a lot of spending put in place to mitigate against the spread. I believe that £1 billion will be set aside for small businesses that can prove to the government that they are already seeing the effects of COVID-19. We saw it with Flybe. We're seeing it with lots of airlines. Even where I am, I must say it's a little bit quiet in our office at the moment. If you come in on the tubes, the crowds are reducing. And we know that the government are preparing, just in case the spread gets out of hand, that there will be an immediate shutdown. And if there is a shutdown, then businesses, of course, have to be prepared to not go under. So there will be lots of tax breaks. There will be some emergency funding in place to support the SMEs in this country.
We're hoping that things don't go out of hand. And talking about that now, banks in the UK are to allow customers to defer mortgage payments, and that's all because of the COVID-19. But for how long will this be?
Gosh, how long is a piece of string, Bissy? Nobody knows. Just listening to the news conference from the outgoing Bank of England Governor, Mark Carney, he was asked quite a similar question, and he said, that the outbreak will die down. There are vaccines being worked on throughout the world. Last week, Prime Minister Boris Johnson pledged £90 million towards scientific and test funding in specialist hospitals. So we know that a vaccine is on its way. A lot of medical practitioners have been seeing what happened in Hubei province in Wuhan, where the virus first manifested, and how those numbers are dwindling down. So once it reaches its peak, we then know that there will be a slowdown in the process. But who knows? Once Rishi Sunak speaks today and he announces all the measures that will be taking place, including mortgage breaks, including tax breaks, including statutory sick pay for freelancers or for people that wouldn't necessarily get it, those details will be announced soon. But I don't want to speculate at this stage.
So how did it feel to hear that the Health Minister, Nadine Dorries, has tested positive to the coronavirus?
Gosh, Bissy, this is a very busy news period in the UK at the moment. And I've got to say that news about Nadine Dorries is really making headlines here, because Nadine Dorries she works within the health ministry. She said that she tested positive, I believe, on Friday morning. Throughout that week, she was seen with the health minister. She was seen up close and personal. There are some pictures, I'm afraid I can't show you them now, of her on Thursday evening with Boris Johnson in the Palace of Westminster, alongside some very senior MPs, because we had International Women's Week. So she was out and about with a lot of people. And because she's a part of the health ministry, she was with her local constituents. She's been giving lots of television interviews. And before, a couple of weeks ago, when the outbreak first came into the UK, what doctors were trying to do is to track down and trace anybody who had come into contact with anybody who had the coronavirus. Nadine Dorries has been in contact with everybody, including the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister is supposed to be seeing the Queen later on today. Also at 12:30 during the budget, which is one of the most packed session in the House of Commons, there will be about 630 to 650 individuals cramped into the House of Commons. So there are concerns. I believe as well, just before I came into the studio, that there is a second MP who was self-quarantined. We don't know if they've tested positive for the coronavirus as of yet. But as we've seen in many other countries across the world, the coronavirus isn't just for the ordinary folk. MPs can get it too. But what's worrying in Nadine Dorris's case is she is part of the Health Ministry and she has come into close contact with very senior officials.
That's indeed a very serious issue there, Juliana. But in spite of all this, let us all stay safe. We'll see you again at 1:30.
Thank you, Bessie.
And that's where we end today's show. Many thanks for watching. I am Bisi Adebayo.